The independence of states or local government under cooperative, coordinate or competitive federalism works against the imperative requirement for powerful centralised control, with immediacy under conditions of international competition as intense as those in the Asian Pacific area, or indeed throughout the world today. At the very least, surely some form of coercive federalism would be required for Australia. In these matters, reference might also be made to the German Grundgesetz, or basic law, that is, constitution, which is regarded generally as a paragon in constitutional drafting. A developmental capitalist Australia logically would require a longer federal political cycle of, say, 4 or 5 years. This would encourage the generation of the medium long-term planning that is presently absent from public administration in Australia. However, against this must be counterbalanced the possibility that an extreme or bad government could do irretrievable damage over that period, particularly one with an ideological internationalist agenda dismissive of the national interest, for example, a Fabian socialist Australian Labor government. A developmental capitalist economy requires powerful centralised government control for often coercive economic policies aimed at establishing an export-driven model of economic development supported by heavy investment in physical and human capital, especially in technical education. There must be concentration of government intervention for disciplined management of both microeconomy, particularly for tariff subsidy and import substitution policies, and macroeconomy as relates inter alia, in particular to control of budget deficits, the level of external debt, and management of the exchange rate. The government must also be powerful enough to protect the nation against exploitation by foreign multinational and transnational corporations and their governments, as well as powerful internal interest groups. Such a regime is the very antithesis of neoliberalism for economic rationalism. Australia also needs a revolution in its bureaucracy, particularly as regards the structure of its central economic agencies, the Department of the Treasury, Finance and Prime Minister and Cabinet, and abandonment of the economic rationalism taught at ANU and other Australian institutions. The bureaucracy trained in Asian institutions such as the University of Tokyo Law School and in Singapore, Taiwan and South Korea, for example, would find Australian training laughable. And this is apart from the networks of government and industrial institutions together with corporations found in the Asian countries, particularly Japan, for the coordinated and cooperative development of their economies. There are three factors currently militating against the safety and security of the Australian nation in the longer term. The first is the policy of Gough Whitlam and Al Grasby, state-sponsored so-called multiculturalism, disregarding the unlikely possibility of a nuclear weapons attack on Australia as multilateral anti-nuclear non-proliferation action should prevail. What would Australia do if, for example, Muslim Indonesia sometime in the future launched a massive conventional warfare attack on our country? Incarcerate all the Muslims in the country in Cowra, as we did with Japanese and Germans, including my German grandfather, Herr Ferdinand Hesse, during World War II? This is a question which the left wing in Australian politics, including Mr. Malcolm Turnbull in the Liberal Party, should give consideration to. Muslim immigrant communities present a particular problem for non-Islamic nations such as Australia because their religion and culture eschew integration, much less assimilation. The advent of Muslim dominance is therefore inevitably only a matter of numbers over time. The second factor is the force which prevents the deregulation effected by economic rationalism itself from being successfully achieved in Australia. The nation's high-cost, intractable, highly unionised workforce and the Anglo-Celtic class conflict and reliance on adversary process underlying it. In this regard, reference might also be made to Hal Kobatch's new book entitled Australia's Secret War, How Unions Sabotaged Our Troops in World War II, which details the treachery of our major Australian trade unions during our fight against the Japanese and the collusion of those unions with Communist Russia. In view of the intransigence of the Australian labour movement, it is difficult to imagine the adoption in this country of the co-determination practiced by management and workforce in Germany and Sweden, or emulation of the altruistic behaviour of workers in the US motor vehicle industry who recently agreed to a 50% reduction in their wages in order to save their corporations, for example. Third, is this bipartisan policy an ideology of neoliberalism or economic rationalism, which is destroying the Australian economy when that economy is our first line of defence? Another threat to Australia's unity and security is the Aboriginal problem, but it is a significant problem essentially because of the anti-Australian forces which are using the Aboriginals to weaken and break up the nation for the purpose of their own left-wing agenda. These forces comprise elements of the progressives of traditional Australian society, together with the new left, and more ominously the Fabian socialists and the communists. In particular, the revolutionary intent of the communists behind the indigenous cause is startlingly revealed in the book Red Over Black, Behind the Aboriginal Land Rights, by Jeff MacDonald, an ex-communist who became incensed by the ruthlessness and evil of the communist conspiracy. The progression in that conspiracy is from the granting of land rights to Aborigines to their recognition in the Federal Constitution, through to the signing of treaties by the Commonwealth of Australia and the Aboriginal, quote, nation, unquote, whatever that is, leading to dependent, state-subsidised separatism, not independence, of the Aborigines. And of course, when the communists have broken up the country and gained control thereof, they will turn on the Aborigines and deprive them of everything the Aborigines have gained. Whatever happens, this is a problem which must be solved with humanity and compassion. I believe that Australia will face the threat of massive conventional warfare invasion in the future. Particularly as our manufacturing industry continues to decline, we become more internationally, economically interdependent, and, for example, as mentioned, Muslim Indonesia becomes the fourth largest industrialized economy in the world by about 2050. To date, it has always been in America's interest to have Australia join it in fighting aggression in the Asian Pacific area and elsewhere. However, Australia would be very foolish to believe that its defence and security are permanently guaranteed under romantic notions of our relationship with the USA and the so-called nuclear umbrella. American protection in the future is clearly uncertain for numerous reasons, namely, 1. The ANZUS Treaty is basically a commitment to consultation rather than defence, and additionally both Australia and New Zealand have foolishly refused American requests for assistance in nuclear defence-related matters. With bipartisan incompetence, the Prime Ministers Hawke and Fraser refused the American request to test-fire missiles off the Tasmanian coast, and New Zealand refused the American request for their nuclear-armed warships to visit New Zealand ports. 2. America apparently has not excluded Australia from its opposition, declared in 2004, to development by additional countries of uranium enrichment and plutonium reprocessing technology. This accords with the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty's prohibition of nuclear weapons sharing with the established nuclear weapons countries, but it is in conflict with Article 4 of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, which provides countries with an inalienable right to develop research, production and use of nuclear energy for peaceful purposes.